From New York, it's That Kevin Show.
See, I knew it.
Come on, Kev. What's a few classified documents between friends?
I told you all the time. I knew it. I knew he had some too.
Here he is, That Kevin McCullough.
Very glad to have you back with us, live from Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough and That Kevin Show, and I'm always pleased to have my next guest because she's just one of the smartest people on the planet. That's why so many people want to know what she thinks when major issues go down in the foreign policy and national security arenas. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome once again, KT McFarland. Hello,
lady. That's great to be with you. Thanks, Kevin.
Last weekend, I, like everybody else, got sucked into a news headline about, 4:30 in the afternoon and ended up being kind of glued to ongoing coverage through the evening. First, it was 100 missiles or maybe drones, and then they were going to be able to fight it off with David's sling and the Iron Dome. And next thing I know, it's the next morning, and it was hundreds upon hundreds. They came from Iran and Yemen. Other proxies were involved, but we also had a pretty good coalition that came to Israel's aid. And the next morning, KT, I wake up and read that my president has strong-armed Benjamin Netanyahu and said, "Oh, good job there. You fought him off. Now don't do it again. Now don't respond because we don't want to escalate this." KT, I don't think that the Iranians or really any of the Islamic enemies of Israel really respect anything except strength. So how does Bibi Netanyahu keep the USA happy and send a message of strength to those people that oppose him?
Well, that's the conundrum. Netanyahu and the coalition, which I was surprised, frankly. I was surprised that Joe Biden had the United States enter that coalition. United States, Britain, Saudi Arabia, amazingly, France, Jordan.
The Princess of Jordan shooting down 5 missiles all on her own.
It's incredible that they were able to do it and they were willing to do it. But here's the problem. Netanyahu, yes, Israel has to respond for a whole lot of reasons, militarily, as well as sending the message, as well as destroying deterrence. But Joe Biden said, don't you dare. If you respond, you're going to do it alone. America's not going to be with you next time. So it puts Netanyahu and all of Israel in a terrible position because on one hand, they need to do it for their own, survival. And on the other hand, if they do it and Joe Biden walks away and leaves Israel alone and stranded, then Israel has a really hard, if not impossible time because Israel needs American intelligence. It needs American weapons to resupply the ones Israel's using. And Iran may have had this barrage, but guess what? And maybe 99% of them were shot down. Iran probably has 3-5 times that many that it can launch again. So Iran says, Israel, don't you dare. We're really coming back after you. And Joe Biden says, Israel, don't you dare. We're going to do it alone. You're going to defend yourself alone. I think Netanyahu is in this horrible position. And what I worry about is that Iran, knowing that they can push Joe Biden around, knowing that Biden is going to do anything to get those Muslim American, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran voters in Michigan to vote for him, that they'll have a crisis. They'll probably have it in the middle or right before the Democratic Convention in July. And then Israel's in a conundrum because does America help them? Does Israel go it alone? I just think that what they need to do, Israel needs to do something. They have every plan on the shelf ready to go at a moment's notice. Do something that maybe doesn't involve any potential loss of life, cyber attack, for example. Understand that if you do go back into Rafah and the West Bank, or Gaza, Joe Biden is probably going to abandon you. And then just stay alive long enough to have a different president who will come in and have Israel's back. Because if Joe Biden is faced with, let's say, massive demonstrations in Chicago during the Democratic Convention, the pro-Palestinian, pro-Iran demonstrators come and lock up the airport, lock up the streets, lock up the hotels, just like the Democrats, anti-war demonstrators did in 1968. Joe Biden could have a real problem on his hands because all he cares about is winning re-election. All those guys, this is Obama's guys. This is Obama's third term. They all they want to do is win, and they'll do anything to win. They'll subvert the Constitution. They'll just do anything to win. And so would they abandon Israel in Israel's most critical moment of need? I don't know the answer to that. They might. And is that a risk Israel can take? I mean, I just say, Israel, do what you got to do now, but understand that the cavalry will be coming with a new president, and just stay alive until then, and don't risk having Joe Biden. Don't give Joe Biden an excuse to dump you.
Well, there's been a lot of conflicted thoughts that I've been kind of mulling through this week. And let's start with the top of the list. Joe Biden paid for the attack on Israel in the pallets of cash that he's released. The Obama administration was sending pallets of cash. As soon as Joe Biden got into office, he thought it was appropriate to begin that process all over again. And I don't think there's any argument that can be made, KT, that if he had not been sending Iran that money, that October 7th wouldn't have happened, and that this last week wouldn't have happened. Am I wrong?
No, you're completely right. But when the pallets of cash, that's chump change compared to what Biden.
Well, and opening the oil markets and everything else. But this is what I'm getting at.
It's also the sanctions. Now, remember,
Joe Biden is funding the Iranian efforts, and now he's telling Israel that they're not allowed to respond. Like, why aren't our lawmakers calling out the administration on their distinctively pro-Iranian viewpoint in this conflict?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the moral courage of the people in Washington, D.C. of either party. But one thing that I think is going to get worse, Kevin, because, so for example, the Biden administration is considering what kind of sanctions. Do they do any sanctions against Iran? They're more concerned with getting China mad at them because Iran sells its oil to China. And so it's not just the pallets of cash. It's not just the high price of oil, which the Biden administration has arranged, but it's the ability of Iran to continue the cash flow. They're continuing to sell oil to particularly to China. And as long as Iran continues to do that, they've got the money coming in the door, and they've got the ability to pay for a really expensive war. You know, the estimates are it's $100 billion Iran has gotten enriched thanks to Joe Biden and his policies. $100 billion. They're making $60 billion a year selling oil to China and other countries in evasion of any kind of sanctions that Joe Biden has refused to enforce. So they can keep fighting for a really long time. And you gotta have the cavalry has to come in at some point, or really the future of the state of Israel, I think, is very much in doubt.
Well, and to think that when you and everybody else in the 45 administration left office, that country was broke, that they were at a very different posture at the negotiating table when it came to their nuclear program. I mean, I kept thinking on Saturday, KT, what if those drones had small nuclear payloads on them, which I think that they would be capable of carrying if you had the technology in its miniature form, finely tuned and well enough developed. The idea that, I was seeing pictures of basically Star Wars happening above the area of Jerusalem. And when you looked at the screen, that didn't bring any comfort to me that we were knocking them all down, because I had never seen that kind of attack be launched against the city of Jerusalem or the city of Tel Aviv like that. And yeah, thank God we got almost all of them. But I don't think the Iranians are going to be satisfied with this attack. We're coming right back with KT McFarland for just a few more minutes.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.